like to call this Council of the Whole meeting to order on Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022 at 7:02 p.m. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mary, roll call.
Councillor Adams.
Present.
Councillor Catrona.
Present.
Councillor Dow. Nope. Councillor Jovan.
Present.
Councillor Lazo.
Present.
Councillor Marchetti.
Present.
Councillor Ryan.
Present.
And Councillor Steves.
Present.
Very good, we have a quorum.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, I do believe you should be reading the pursuant to the Mass.
I believe you're
Governor
right.
Baker's March 12th order.
That's right. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Council of the Whole is being conducted via in-person as well as remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by watching Southbridge Cable Access Channel 192 or by the remote information noted below. We will post the record of this meeting on the town's website at https://ci.southbridge.ma.us as soon as we are able. A roll call vote is required for all votes taken under this order. Thank you, Councilor Adams.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 3, consider and accept the Town Council meeting minutes of Monday, December 13th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Very good. Any additions, deletions, substitutions? Very good. Roll call.
Councillor Adams.
Yes.
Councillor Catrona.
Yes.
Councillor Daniel.
Yes.
Councillor Jovan.
Yes.
Councillor Lazo.
Yes.
Councillor Marchetti.
Yes.
Councillor Ryan.
Yes.
And Councillor Steves.
Yes.
Very good. Agenda item number 4, further discussion on Charter Review Committee amendments and take any action thereof. Councils are advised to bring their charter review materials. Just before we start, I'd like to say that I'd like to talk about one possible item at a time. I let it get away from me a little bit the other night, and we were talking about 2 or 3 things at the same time, and that led to some confusion on the parts of people, including me. So let's hold it to one thing at a time if we can, and we've got all night. Okay, very good. Any councils would like to start? Councilor Lazo.
I'd like to bring up the residency clause that we talked about at the last council meeting. I handed out a kind of a rough draft of something. I'm going to read it. Don't pay attention to the number. I just put a number in there, 425 and 426. What my intent is to spur a discussion on residency clause, whether it's all employees, department heads, just the manager. I just want to bring this to the full turn, that give it a shot, and if we can let the people decide at the ballot, it's their government, they're rumbling about it. I thought that I will bring it up, we'll discuss it. I know that we have some other information on some other communities and what they do, which is a good comparison. But at this point, I'd just like to read this, and I'll enter it in as an amendment. Town residency requirement. Except all provided in Massachusetts general law, every person employed in the town of Southbridge on or before June 14th, 2022 shall, within 12 months of the start of the employment, be a resident of the town of Southbridge and shall not cease to be a resident during his or her employment by the town.
Councilor, did you mean before or after June 14th, 2022?
After. It says, on or after, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, it says after. And then on 426, I put, as we saw in some of the other towns, the town council may waive, I put the 12-month requirement by a unanimous vote of 9. And again, the date of June 14th, I just plugged that date in. That's not etched in granite. If people want to come up with other ideas, because of the lack of discussion at the charter review, I thought now's the time to talk about it and hammer something out that's palatable to the town of Southbridge, because we talked about this, and I don't want to reiterate what we talked about, but I'll leave it up to the other councilors.
All right, is that a formal amendment?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Very good. For the sake of clarity, again, for the second item, do you want the word extend or waive the 12-month requirement? You said waive, but the word is extend.
Well, by extending it, you're waiving it. How we word that, we could may waive.
You're not waiving it. You're extending it, right?
Mr. Mayor,
If I may, if we're talking about extension, then there should be a time listed in there for the extension. If we're talking about extending the time limit for the requirement, just for the sake of discussion, if the council wants to vote to give a 6-month extension to make it 18 months.
We can tell.
That was what I thought you meant by that.
The thing is, if you adopt the first portion, they're going to have 12 months to get their residency in the first section. In the second section, we were talking that if there's difficulty or moving problems, that the council will take under consideration to extend the 12-month. So I'm calling an extension
Okay.
the 12-month requirement. Now, if you want to detail 6 months more, I don't have a problem with that. I think that would define exactly. I just thought that leaving it up to the government by the situation that's being presented to you, because an employee or a department head or manager will come to you and say, I cannot move, I need an extension of this. This clause would give you the ability to extend that.
Very good. We have an amendment and item and a second to it. Councilor Lazo, would you like to speak to it first? Are you all set?
I'm letting it set. I think the councilors need that input.
Very good. Okay. Councilor Steves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did talk a little bit about this, obviously, at the last council meeting, and I have no real problem necessarily with the idea of a well-structured residency requirement, but I think that saying every person who works for the town is way excessive. The idea that any waiver or extension, however you phrase it, has to be unanimous. I don't think anything by law can be unanimous. I think the law requires that you have to have at least some opportunity for dissension. Although, because we don't work as a system requiring consensus. So I would have no problem with it obviously being a unanimous vote. And in fact, I would have no problem with it. And I was thinking that maybe we should phrase it as the council may vote to waive this requirement, but must revisit said vote annually. So that it isn't perpetual. But if we do vote on it again for whatever reason, that if there's a good reason for the person not to live here, then sometimes there are good reasons for that. Like if their kid is young and in school or whatever the reasons. And I'm thinking that as far as the first section, several of the things that I had sent around, and they should be, and just for Mary's sake, they probably should be attached to the minutes. In most of these other towns, they restrict it. They're referring specifically to town administrators or town managers doing it. Some of them don't have any requirements at all. And they'll say something like, the town administrator need not be a resident of the town, in this case from Webster, or the Commonwealth at the time of appointment, but unless the selectman shall, by majority vote of the full board, extend such time or waive such requirement, a residence in the town of Webster shall be established by within 1 year following appointment. Now we can obviously, and the time frames that they use here in various towns, they're often 1 year, and that's what you suggested. There was one in here that they have 8 months to do it. Several other towns don't have it at all. And I think that when we're talking about the manager, that makes some sense. I think when we're talking about your everyday employee in town, it makes no sense at all. Because, I mean, think about it. If you had a job and you were working out of town and they required you to move, but your entire, everything else outside of your job is in the community you live in, you may even be part of the town government there or whatever. I think that would help. Quite frankly, I think that while that would maybe help them understand our community more, a lot of them understand it pretty well. And I think that it would discourage their participation in their own community. And I think trying to encourage people's participation in their own community is generally a good thing. And I don't see any contradiction between them being involved there and here, in most cases. And so I would recommend that we amend this to be specific to the town manager, and that we throw in the line that it suggested that council may vote to waive this requirement, but must revisit said vote annually.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay, we have an amendment and a second. And essentially, you're restricting this just to the town manager.
Yes.
And the second section,
Oh, that would be, the council may vote to waive this requirement, but must revisit said vote annually.
Can you say that again? I didn't hear that.
town council may vote to waive this requirement, but must revisit said vote annually.
But what does that?
And I should have said that for the first section, to also amend that to be a majority vote, not unanimous.
Majority vote.
Yeah.
Is there of 5 people, you're saying?
Yeah. Majority of the whole council, yes.
Are you putting the number 5 on that?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lazo.
To the
Councilor
amendment.
Lazo.
To the amendment of the amendment. I don't have a problem with the waiving of the, I think that given the council the discretion of waiving the residency or to do anything like that, I think it's a good thing. Even if we created another clause 427 that says the town council may waive residency clause by a vote of majority 5. My exception is you're changing the residency clause for every person employed in the town of Southbridge. Yep. All right, I could kind of understand the lower ranks, but I can't eliminate the department heads. I think all our management people need to be in town, and there's a massive cost savings in the town of Southbridge on vehicles and various other things. So I would hope that you would reconsider and put the department heads with the town manager, although they're all management positions. I would concede that, maybe not all employees, but I really do think that the leadership should lead by example. It should, again, I say, drive on the roads of Southbridge, shop in Southbridge, and I also want to make a point that we don't want to hurt any employees that we already have. So that's why whatever date that is picked should be a cutoff where anybody that is hired remains as is, pre-existing, non-conforming to whatever we pass.
So they'd be grandfathered in.
Right, exactly. So for me, I think the only thing, because I agree with you 100% on, I'll go along with some of the stuff, but I think we need to get those department heads in with the manager. That's the only, I don't want to consider another amendment on top of amendment, a third amendment. I would hope that maybe you would amend it to say and department heads, then I'd be all right with it.
Council Steves.
Oh, yeah, to expand on this, while you were talking about that, I was specifically Googling department head residency requirements. And the first thing that came up, interestingly enough, was a story about a court case regarding the Springfield city's ordinances that require, let's see here, they say they have a 7-member residency compliance commission and a separate compliance unit within the personnel department. From 1995, it requires provisions requiring the creation of blah, blah, blah. But none of that stuff has ever existed. And the requirement between 1995 and 2008 was amended several times to enforce residency for new employees and promoted employees after 95. They're much broader than, they're actually closer to what you were just suggesting. And they say that since it's in the law, the city has to enforce it. I don't know what that will turn into, since this story just came
Mr.
out
Chair, can,
last year.
Mr. Chair, can Councilor Steve speak in the microphone? I know the recorder can't hear him, or
Sorry
I
about
can't
that.
hear me.
I was saying that there is a very recent story from 2021 about a city ordinance from Springfield that is pretty much along the lines of what Scott was just proposing. And it's been around for years. It has never been used. And the court just ordered the city to enforce it as of December 31st, which was interesting. So we'll see how that works. I wouldn't be surprised it ends up driving people away, because I don't want to do that. I guess I bounce back, before I decide whether I wanted to amend it to include department heads, and I understand your arguments, because I have had a couple of people raise the concern about staff being not in town as well. But I would like to know what your thoughts are, as in what do you think that would accomplish in practice, beyond the fact that they would just actually be getting apartments in town, but not necessarily being in town, because we've seen that happen before.
I think, Mr. Chairman, can I answer that?
Certainly.
I think what we have to look at is multifaceted reasons why this happened, that's why I'm proposing this. One is the expense to some of the vehicles and the purchasing as part of the driving out of town. I mean, like I said, the voters, people on the street are having problems with it. You have morale problems in some of our departments, because one of the things that always blurted out is, well, they don't know what we do here, and so on and so forth. I think it's a morale builder. I think it's good for the rank and file to see the boss from Southbridge, or at least a resident in Southbridge. And I think that when you look at it in the culmination of what you're trying to accomplish in Southbridge, I think it works. One of the things you have to remember is, I don't know, I think there was one councilor said, well, you got to buy a house and you got to do. In the original charter, when Florence Chandler became manager, it's all you had to do is live, sleep in Southbridge, and be a registered voter, covered the residency. You could have an apartment, you could have a condo. How you live here is not our job, but to request the residency on department heads, and is, I think, better for the morale of the voters, the citizens, and the rank and file department that they head up.
Councilor Mike Heddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. I actually think it's a good idea what Councilor Lazo has put together here. First of all, it's only on employees hired after that date, so it doesn't cover the employees that are working right now. I think it's best to include all employees. When I see people who are working for the town of Southbridge, I want them to live here so they know what's going on when they live here. They drive on the same streets I drive on. They know the conditions of the streets. They pay the same taxes I pay. They know the problems that we're facing as a community. So that's why I think it's a good idea. I don't have a problem with making it by a majority vote rather than all 9. But I do think that employees of the town of Southbridge should live here and face the same things that we face as residents of Southbridge. And I also know that part of the zoning rules or bylaws of Southbridge, there's a review team called the Development Review Team, and this team does site plan reviews. So if an applicant comes in and files an application for a site plan review with the town clerk, it goes before the planning board or this Development Review Team, DRT. Now that is in our bylaws, and the makeup of the Development Review Team are all department heads. And these are people who don't live here. And they're making decisions about what businesses can come into Southbridge. So I think it's important that especially department heads should live in Southbridge. So I just want to make that clear. I just want to say that I don't think we're going to be voting on this. I don't think that that's council of the whole. I don't believe that we would be voting on this amendment anyway. It would be part of our report to the full council. I believe that's how it works. I could be wrong, but I don't believe there would be a vote on this amendment. It would just be part of our report to the full council, back to us, to make a final decision. At this point, I think so. I could be wrong, but I think that's how it works. Thank you.
Councilor Adams, then Councilor Lazo.
I'll turn it over to Councilor Lazo just in case we have some. I believe Councilor Marquetti is correct. It's going to have to go part of the amendment at a regular town council or special council meeting, not this evening though. It's just discussion, but if there's something that's important and it gets all the way up that the council can agree on down the road at the next town council meeting when we discuss it, I believe it's on the agenda anyways for Monday night. I think that's where it'll be voted for, favor of or not. That's all I had right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Steves.
Just as a footnote, we are a full council. We are a special councilman. We have exactly the same authority the full council has. And in fact, we're almost all here. So we can vote on this because it's one item agenda. We have every right to vote on this. That's just for the case of. But anyway, I just sent the Springfield law to everybody, including Mary, for the record, and it's a fairly lengthy ordinance. It talks about conditions of employment, promotion, certificate of residence. They do specifically state that it has to be primary residence. They do have a fairly lengthy section on waivers. They have the Residency Compliance Commission that I mentioned from that article a few minutes ago. There's all kinds of stuff in here, and it's something that if you want to consider doing something like that, I think we definitely need to make it so that people have an opportunity to get out of it, if necessary. It does very clearly state that it very specifically exempts those who are current employees. Only people that are becoming employees after the start date does it apply to. Which I think I don't think you can have retroactive laws anyway. So if you want to consider that, it's fairly long. So you might want to read it before obviously we can't vote on it if we're going to put something that long. That's all I have at the moment.
Would the citizen like to speak?
Yeah, Maureen Doyle, 771 Lebanon Hill.
Yes.
I got to tell you,
Oh.
yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Maureen Doyle, 771 Lebanon Hill. In addition to the great points that Councilors Marchetti and Lazo have brought up, I want to point out another reason to have a residency clause for everybody keeping our money in town. I'm really into a local economy, and salaries are really high, and that would, I'm not saying they would solely spend their money here, but we're talking about increasing the economic opportunities in town and stuff. That would help keep money in town, and they would promote different things. So consider that. Thank you.
Councilor Ryan, then Councilor Lazo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I I could concede the argument around the manager. I'm not going to be convinced, though, of every employee being required just because it makes no economic sense. You're not going to be able to enforce a requirement for somebody to move into town for a minimum wage job, which some of the jobs we do offer in town are. So you have to, with a broad bylaw like that, you're going to be restricting people who would just be doing those lower tasks. So the department heads, I'm a little mixed on, because I think there's a case for certain department heads. Yes, there is a case to be made that future ones definitely probably should be have a residency requirement. But there's other ones where I look at it and I don't. And I look at the job market for those roles and how difficult it is to find some of those, in particular around public finance, around public planning. We're already having a hard time attracting new blood into those industries, and now enforcing a requirement for someone to completely uproot their lives, then some people are just not going to do it. In a climate where it's favoring applicants right now, it seems like it could put the town in a very difficult position to either have no qualified people, good qualified people to fill those roles, or the people we hire are going to have to be trained on site, which there is some benefit to that, but at the same time there's also a lot of disadvantages to that, right? You don't have somebody who can get off the ground running. You need somebody who's going to have to build up the skills. Which is why, again, specifically in these lower tiers, you probably wouldn't want this type of requirement, because you want to attract new people in, and you want young people and other people to come in and work in the town. They start off at one of these lower ranking jobs, and they look and they see if they like the town, and they consider a promotion, and if one of those promotions says you have to be a resident of the town, they'll consider it, right? I don't want to hurt the economic engine that has been growing in Southbridge, and I don't want to have government be hindered because of an onerous requirement. That's my perspective on it. I can be convinced to support one for the higher levels, especially for the manager, because it's such a high level and high duty position with a high benefit and salary item, right? So I think I could be convinced in that, but I don't think, especially some of these lower ones, I couldn't be convinced to support a residency requirement. It'd be too onerous. We won't find anybody to fill these positions.
Councilor Adams, Councilor Lazo, then Councilor Adams.
I really like the discussion tonight. Everybody's looking through different lenses, seeing it a different way. I lived in a town where they did have hire the locals, so to speak, and it was, you'd go into the fire department and they were all local guys, and the police department. What's happening is we're falling into the society trench where we're basically saying, okay, this is a transient thing, you're going to be here for a year or two and then go. You know why Will Canoia was here for so long? Because he lived here. You look at Maddie Dowse. Why is she here? Because she lives here. You can turn around and there's still some that might be one town over as our finance director, maybe 2 towns over. My thing is this discussion tonight is healthy, good for the voters. I hope they're watching, because I think right now we're at the verge of when you suggest a waiver that Gus brought up, the town council may waive the residency clause by a vote of the majority 5. That doesn't pigeon-toe the council into just plowing it down their throats. There'd be a transition. In other words, anybody hired before a certain date is insulated from this. Anybody hired after the date is now going to fall under it. But the council still has the out that if there's somebody in a hardship, that you could do something for an employee or a department head. But I think, and again, I think at minimum the department heads, and the reason why I'm thinking this way is, and I'm willing to compromise, is because say we do the town manager and the department heads. Let's see how it runs. Let's see how it goes. Then if we think that the next round you do all the employees. I personally think it should be all the employees. That's my heart of hearts. I lived in this town when it was that way. And I thought it was very successful. John LaFleur, Dean, you know, we promoted within and local and live in town. Now, some moved out, some moved in. Florence Chandler was the manager. That way the charter was tested. I spoke to the actual author of the original charter back then, and he said you can get a domicile. The thing is, to qualify, you have to be a registered voter and live in the town. Doesn't mean you have to buy a house. We had one town manager, Jack Howley, built a house. Mike Coughlin bought a house. Some rented. I mean, there's 100 different, you know, you could, whatever fits, whatever the flavor is. But I think we really need, at minimum, the department heads, and just for the morale of the town, that the leadership is Southbridge. It goes a long way. I'm a team sport guy, played a lot of sports, and a lot of time the integrity of the person above makes a difference if you're local. And I know that there was a previous speaker talking about the economics. Economics, we've had the revolving door in the police station for a little bit. Our DPW just ran into a major league morale problem, which got ironed out, thank God for McCall. And we have different things going on in our other departments that we have to deal with through the manager. So I think when you look at it, you want somebody to eat, sleep, and breathe Southbridge. Put Southbridge first. And, you know, economically, keep your money in town. Most of all, when Mike McCall said he wanted to move into the town, you have to feel the pain, you have to see it in order to understand it. When he said that, I gained a lot of respect for him, and I know he had a struggle trying to get a house because of the market. There's where you can work with it, with the waiver, to give more time. You like to rent a place, I mean, we're building apartments, the luxury apartments in K Street, L Street. Wells, we have some nice places, right? And our community is constantly rehashing some of these 3 acres that are looking great. The people that are putting money into them. So we do have housing for people, and I think that we really have to consider this. And I really would hope that, Gus, if you don't amend it, I'm going to make a motion for it. But, and again, we can debate whether it's done tonight or you want to have a recommendation to council. I'm not here to do a floor fight. I'm here to represent the people of Southbridge, and they're very disgruntled over the residency. Thank you.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going over rules and regulations where the committee of the whole shall refer to the full council meeting called by the council chairperson or vote of the entire council. The purpose of the meeting is for gathering additional information required and dealing with one subject only. So as per defined by the Roberts Rules of Order. So I'm not really sure if there can be a possible vote at a council of the whole meeting. So I'm just looking at that. I wouldn't be comfortable anyways voting for this evening anyways. Anyway, so I listened to quite a few people, and at first I'm trying to understand Councilor Lazo's mindset when he came up with this, and I think I completely understand where he's coming from. I really, really do, and that mindset of teamwork and all that kind of stuff, and that's great. But I'd be remiss that first I'd address every employee in this town. So you're saying every teacher, every administrator, every economic person, every DPW, police, fire, and all the other ones that work in this building and others in the library have to live in Southbridge. Is that what we're saying?
If I can answer.
Maybe that somebody can, that way I can get clarification. I'll turn it over to Councilor Marquetti.
Thank you. I think according to Councilor Lazo's amendment here, except as provided by Mass General Law, and I think Mass General Law covers police and fire, so it wouldn't be police and fire.
What about teachers?
Well, I guess so, teachers, unless
So,
we
I
just
mean,
do,
that's the hard part where
unless
we're
we just do
kinda hard.
department heads. But
Okay, and I understand the days, and go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, what's on the floor right now is an amendment to my amendment. I put forth this sheet, which was stringent, and I wanted to spur good conversation. I think we've had great conversation, and Councilor Steves offered an amendment to change all employees to just town manager.
No,
That's what's in front of us right now.
Council Lazo, I heard that, but I also know Council Marquetti brought up he wouldn't be opposed to all person.
Yeah.
And so that was after the amendment. I'm just
Right.
letting, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, no, but what's in front of us right now is the amendment to the amendment, and I was pleading for a department head manager proposal instead of just the town manager, and that's where it's at. I mean, I'm in favor of all, but I would be willing to compromise and get the department heads and the manager on. I would be good with it.
I'll turn it over to the citizen member if he wants to speak or whatever you'd like to do, Chair. I've got more, but go ahead.
I
I have no
reserve-
problem listening to this.
I reserve your time.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Identify
Thank you,
yourself,
Mr. Chairman.
please.
I don't know if you can hear me. The most important part of this thing, I was torn when I,
Identify yourself.
I'm sorry. George Shenya, 23 Teresa Ave, Southbridge. When this was first talked about a couple weeks ago at the council meeting, I was torn about the residency part of a suggestion maybe of all the employees. As a former employee of the town, I lived in town and I invested in my community, as I still do today. And I find that when you invest in your community strives to become a better community. So by being members of this community, the members of this community and employees would strive. It's a difficult suggestion to say all employees, because your benefit package doesn't really take into consideration the everyday working guy that's out there. The department head, making it a residency or the town manager, you make it as a condition of employment. And in that condition of employment, you negotiate the package, the benefit package that you have. But by having your department heads and town manager being a resident of this community, it makes them sit back a little bit and decide what is best for their department and also what is best for the community, such as the tax rate. So the department head is looking, and I'll use my example, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the fire chief, but you take in the fire department, it sets the budget, and it's easy to say, I want a new inspector's car, I want a new fire truck, and I want a new ambulance. You've got to pay for those things. So by being with a taxpayer of the community that's going to help pay those bills, I think the department head will look at the department in a different manner to not only look what is best for the community, but what is best for the department also. But the most important thing that you decide in this charter thing is you're bringing it to the people to make that decision. And we're constantly hearing out there today that it's government, it's government, it's government, and they're not listening to the people. But the most important thing today is that you make a decision, and the people will vote on that decision if they want to go along with what your suggestions might be, what the Charter Commission might be. They had the opportunity to go to the charter reviews to voice their concerns, but the biggest thing is what you decide as a council is to allow the people to vote whether they want any part of that charter, whether it's a residency for department heads, whatever you decide to do in itself. But I think it's important at the minimum is that you look into a resident for the town manager, and you also look for residency for department heads. But you're going to have to be aware when you make those commitments that the benefit package is going to have to show that example. You're going to have to decide, well, if they're going to come here to Southbridge, the benefit package may have to reflect it. And it also gives you, as a council, maybe the fire to move this community forward in a different manner. Also, to be able to make it attractive for the people that's going to come here to work. The biggest complaint that I've heard my whole time being away and coming back here is the school system, on how messed up it is. As a grandparent, I don't want my kids going to the high school or junior high, to be honest with you, because of all the turmoil that I've heard. Fix those problems, then you're going to see your department heads and your town managers probably wanting to live in this community, be a part of this community. We've had successful town managers over the course of the year that became very involved in their community, this community. But I think by having them live here and having the department heads live here, you're going to see a little bit, you show by example. And if you show by example that you enjoy and you like living in this community, maybe your everyday employees will look at the same thing. But the bottom line, the last thing I have to say is that whatever you decide, you're moving it forward to the people, and the people's going to make that decision, and it's time for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Adams.
Thank you, George. I appreciate that. That was great. I go back and I know Councilor Lazo brought up Maddie Monadias. She's a town clerk, but she's also elected, so she's required to live here. And that's another subject that could possibly be brought up on the town clerk side, because we may not always have a Maddie, being elected. So that'd be something else that could be brought up when it comes to this charter. But I got that we have this, the amendment to the amendment. I do believe we will limit the pool by forcing people to live in the town. I come from a big city, grew up in a big city, and people, police, and all that kind of stuff, they didn't always live in Santa Ana. They may have lived in Costa Mesa or another town over, or city over, and they came in. I will say this, the investment, I look at some of the department heads, most of the department heads, and I see an investment that they are making here in this town to better, and I've seen it in the last 3 years, how it has really changed as some department heads have left, and some department heads have already stayed, and they've continued to help our town, i.e. police chief, fire chief, and all that kind of stuff. And they made investments through the Emergency Operations Center during COVID that they didn't live here, but they stayed here late at night and didn't even get a stipend for what they did. So they invested in our town. I look at the economic director, I look at the planning, and I see quite a few investments there. Do not live in town, live far away from town, works late hours. No matter what time, I can always give her or him a call, and they answer the phone. And they don't live in this town, but they invest in this town. I would say the department heads can go ahead and live here. Yeah, they can rent a $200 a month room, or whatever it may be. They're not paying property taxes, they're just renting a place. They have a residency here. That's it. I mean, I look at the town that I work for right now, and there's a big issue about the residency clause in there, because accusations are flying all over the place. It's unfair to the town manager there. But that being said, she's got a place there. She's a resident. Now, I don't know if she lives there or not all the time. She may be coming back and forth. We've had town managers that lived here and bought a home here. They also helped change the charter because of their spending habits. I don't have a problem, and I think it's great that we're bringing this up. I don't really have a problem in my eyes as far as the town manager is concerned after the town manager's contract is over. I don't think it's fair to him or his family to sit there and throw this on them. I'm not really sure about the department heads. Because the department heads turn around, you're losing valuable assets that have been pretty successful here in the last few years, and probably before my time on the council. I wouldn't be opposed when they try to hire somebody on. Residency is a plus. Something like that. Because I do really think that if we hammer it down and say this is what we have to have, we lose a pool of personnel that we can gain traction from. And it's been proven by the recent hiring from our town manager to his decisions to hire other individuals or replace other individuals or put them in different positions or higher ups or pay raises, stuff like that. I think by his hiring techniques, it's been a plus for us. And I understand we're not always going to have the town manager that we have right now, but I wouldn't have a problem looking at it after that, this town manager's contract is over, or after this town manager decides he needs to move on to greener pastures or browner pastures, whatever it may be, for his family's sake, for his own life. But I try to throw a lot of stuff out here at the same time. But I would say us as counselors are responsible, just not for the purse strings, but also for the ideas that needs to go to the staff of this town and say, and then push that agenda. Infrastructure, that started 3-4 years ago, and then that moved forward to a payment management plan. Our evaluation system has changed. Now we have curbside. This is our responsibility as counselors to push forward towards the staff and make them do our bidding in a sense of, obviously, professional way. I just have a really hard time saying department heads now. When it comes to vehicles or whatever it may be, that may be something that we have to take a look at down the road. But I will say, that's a hard fight to fight, because if you're talking about personnel, essential personnel, I believe at least the 3 that have it right now, department heads I should say, are essential personnel that probably need to be on the scene as soon as possible. But I understand where Councilor Lazo's coming up, Councilor Steves, Councilor Marchetti, I understand. I just have a hard time swallowing that big pill at this point to say all or just department heads and the town manager. I would be able to work with somewhere in the town manager range, and with a waiver or extension or circumstances that happen down the road. But I appreciate you bringing it up, though. I really, really do. But I have a hard time with even just doing department heads. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Catrona or Councilor Jovan, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I think there's been a lot of good points brought up this evening. I think the residency requirements are very good for the point, for the fact of the town manager as well as department heads. I think there's been a lot of good discussion this evening. When we talk about emergency personnel, the police, fire, DPW, I think it's healthy for them to live in the town. They can respond to a call much faster. Employees who live within Southbridge are more involved in their jobs and their neighborhoods. So I would certainly be in favor of the town manager as well as department heads and living in town and having that requirement. I think when department heads take on their responsibilities to take on their jobs, whether they work 40 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours, they know that fact when they come in. And as far as compensation, they're being compensated for that time. So I would certainly, again, favor not every employee, but the department heads and town manager. Thank you.
Councilor Jovan, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. Just to echo necessarily what we're making this discussion this year. Thank you. Just a couple of things. One, to the concept that is that live here, they shop here and all that. I mean, I know we found that some employees that don't live in the town still shop in our shops, and shop in our stores, and participate in the economics going through the home and pick up things. So I certainly understand that, but I'm sure they participate in the local economy to contribute. Regarding a previous speaker who said that if an individual lived here as a department head and was putting forward requests for equipment, I would expect that department heads would put their requests for equipment before the council, but let's remember that the council with the ultimate determination as to what is asked. So while that individual, if they don't live here, they're advocating their department, and I'm sure they, in speaking with a lot of them, they do understand the limitations of our budget, and to face it, pay taxes in their own town, and they fail to people that we have a big pool to draw on are enough for us to get employees now to work in this community. So, an all-employee push, I do not support that. As far as department heads, I would want to define and narrow down what department heads we're talking about. What determines a department head? We have some people that are in department head status, but now we're talking every department from the tax office to all the other ones. So it's a great discussion that I think deserves a little more debate. And I'll just leave it at that right now and hear the rest of the discussion. But certainly a lot of thought on this. I would like to see some public input on this topic to really get a flavor of what we're talking about. And also, Councilor Lazo could share who the author is speaking to. That individuals around that were just to have a conversation with me. So I would like to pick that person's thought process as well. So I'd like to know who the original author was. Thank you.
Can I, Mr. Chair, just real quick,
Councilor Adams.
if you don't mind, thank you. I know it's a little off topic, but this hybrid thing, like before, is not working really, really well. And we discussed this before about this hybrid meetings. People can't hear them, they're echoing. I'd hope that town council will consider it again at the next town council meeting, but people can't even hear what's saying. It doesn't work, and we said that before. Thank you.
Very good.
Sorry to get off topic.
That's all right. Councilor Lazo.
Just a quick overview. I mean, I didn't understand much of what Mr. Jovan said. I apologize. Maybe it was something to do with the speaker. Not him, but the voice. It just was rattling and cracking. Let me just throw a few things out there. I know everybody, the standard panic is no one's going to come here if they want to live here. But they'll take your money. They'll take the paycheck, and then they'll leave. That philosophically is just wrong. We ring a fire bell. The bell rings. I remember when the bell used to ring, 6 firefighters came off of Morris Street. 6. We ring the bell now, 1. The assistant chief, and he's a good one. So when you turn around and say, I know that I'm the local guy with the folksy hometown thing going, the bottom line comes down to is everybody has an opinion on this. But when the bell rings and you don't have firefighters because they live out of town and they're coming in, you're talking about performance. But why not? Because if the chief's out of town, why did we give another? It costed us an extra command vehicle in Southbridge because our chief lived out of town. We need a command vehicle here. So we transferred one command vehicle down, and then we bought a new one for the chief. So, and we're not talking about people here. I don't want names on what I'm talking about. It's how we do business. It's just not right. And again, we can get the vehicle talk later, if that's what you want to do. This has been proposed. Department heads should live in town at minimum with the town manager. This town manager said he was moving to town. In the interviews, he is going to move into Southbridge. I was there. He said you should feel the sting. You should be on the ground in the town of Southbridge. That's why when I said, let the people decide, put this on the ballot. Why do we be dictatorial to the people? Put it on there. If the townspeople want all people, full residency, let them decide. 9 people will decide for 16,000 people. When we have an opportunity to put it on the ballot, it's their government, it's their departments. And I'm not going to say that I know more than the people out on the street. They live it. They do live here. That's the thing that's a stone in my shoe, is that the people that do live here drive on roads that are now paved. And they also drive on roads that they keep fixing their front ends on. But if you don't drive on those roads that you have to fix your front end, and you drive out wherever you live and the roads are fine, sometimes they just don't think things are right. So in the big picture, when you look at a fire department, your fire department should be response time. Everybody knows that. But if the chief can't do response time, how can the men do response time? It starts at the top, guys, and that's why I'm willing to compromise in this charter revision to do department heads and to do the town manager. Not this town manager. We already drew the line on, let's put a date there. And Gus also added the waiver by a unanimous of the council 5. So it doesn't pigeonhole the council, but the thing is, allow it to go to the people. You'll get a feel of what they think. And it's hard to get that feel. Most of the time it's when you're in a hardware store, a coffee shop, a restaurant, and you're a counselor, and somebody's bending your ear, and that's what they're talking about, or other subjects. So I think we as elected officials, if we are going to represent in the purest way, is put it on a ballot. I mean, I want to debate. This is a healthy debate, guys. This is good. But I still think let the package go to the voters, and if they vote it down, then it's down. Thank you.
Council Steves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on that, what Councilor Marquetti said quite a while ago now about state law and police and fire, that's Mass General Law, Chapter 31, Section 58. They can't be required to live in town, but they must be within 10 miles maximum of the town borders. However, I think you guys are actually making some. I still think that the average rank and file employees probably shouldn't be required that because it doesn't make much sense to me. I guess I'm willing to send it to the voters to require department heads as well. However, I would like to throw in obviously we have the waiver in there already. I'm thinking that this is, in Boston, they require all department heads to be residents and voters. The mayor can waive if approved by the Residency Commission. All employees, however, it says, which they define as any person receiving money from the city, excluding police and fire, have to be residents. Of course, we're talking a city that's 600,000 people, not 16,000. So I don't think it would work here. And the state legislature, was it in 2019, I guess, approved a bylaw change for Ipswich, specifically regarding the town manager, that applies only to the second and subsequent terms. They don't have to be for the first term, but when if they get reappointed to a second and subsequent term, then they must after the first year of the second term. So I don't know if we want to consider something like that. And that's it at the moment.
Councilor Adams.
I guess my question, and that's a good point, is how many people have been waived by the mayor not to live in town?
I don't know.
I mean, it's great to have rules and regulations and all that kind of stuff, but if you don't follow those rules and regulations, or they're all waived out, why do you even have the rules and regulations in the first place? If they're going to be waived constantly due to school systems, due to the husband or wife or the partner working in a different job, different city, stuff like that. So I guess, I can understand that, and that's Boston, and boy, they have 300,000 people, and we're at 17,000. So, again, I argue the point. Thank you.
And to follow up on that, I completely agree with you, because that first article that I was reading from Springfield, they haven't even enforced the law in, 25 years. That's why the court said you have to enforce it. They haven't been doing it. So I don't know if that applies to Boston, but it certainly applies to Springfield. So.
If I may, I'd like to add my comments. I am vehemently opposed to a residency requirement. I think that we would be severely restricting the talent pool that would be applying for jobs to come to Southbridge. We're having a hard time now, as it is, filling positions where we're having low numbers of people responding to the positions. As being a member of the Town Manager Search Committee a couple of years ago, I can't tell you the number of candidates that we had that had absolutely no qualifications whatsoever that were applying, and the number versus the number of people that were applying that had top-notch qualifications. in being involved in education for my career, for making my livelihood, I saw people who were educators that cared about their students tremendously, which I liken to other employees working in the town, caring about their function in town, their citizens in town as well. I just don't believe that you have to be a resident of town to care about the town. And I think that's been proven many times by the works that we've seen our department heads doing right now. We have a fine staff of department heads. I understand that they'd be grandfathered through if everything were to come to pass down into the future. I just have this guttural sense that it's not the way to go. I agree that the voters ultimately need to decide. I would like to see this as a ballot question, and we can investigate it and follow up with proper research on how to get this done if and when that time comes. But just adding my 2 cents to the general comments to this amendment, I would not be supporting this amendment because I don't support the concept in its entirety. Thank you. Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just last few words was, I think the vehicle issue is something that could be discussed down the road with the councilors and stuff like that. I haven't heard from very many residents who talk about having a requirement here. They just want their roads fixed. They want business. They want retail. They want a better Southbridge, not so much as far as they should be living here. Now, I can understand the concept of that whole thing, but I'm in agreement. But I will say the department heads have invested their time and energy into this town. I understand they receive a paycheck, just like most of us do. I just think it's going to hurt the town. I feel like it's short-sightedness, and I think down the road, the town will pay for it when we're long gone because of the charter, the new charter, if they decide to vote this in or we decide to move this forward. I do think in the long run, the town will suffer for that, especially when you have bright young kids. I guess my question, I know the town manager, he's probably on the computer, but when we had a lot of job openings this year, lots, how many residents of Southbridge actually applied? I'd like to have an idea where that number is at. I understand moving here to be a resident of Southbridge, but how many residents that live here right now from our pool of 17,700 some odd people applied for these positions from the treasurer, economic director, and all these other things, and police, fire, stuff like that. So, thank you. That's all I have. But again, I will say, I apologize. Councilor Lazo, thank you for bringing this up.
Councilor Lazo.
There's two sides to this issue, and I respect your opinions on being in opposition to this. The last time our school district even could get on the playing field educationally was when the locals were running the school district. We had a level 1 high school, ran by local people that lived here. They felt the pain, they knew the budgets, they fought hard, they talked to councilors because they lived on the side of them. We're going through a transition right now that Southbridge residents are being basically eliminated from the Southbridge school system. And I can give you the list if you'd like, but it's not for tonight. When you turn around and you talk about department heads, you can praise some of them, but some of them got to go. If you want me to list them for you, see me privately. Because there are some people don't belong at the helm. Period. I can give you chapter and verse, and this is why I'm so passionate about how they have to live here. Because when there is something, when the crap hits the fan, there are issues with some of these department heads, okay? I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm not going to be the pro-establishment guy. I'm going to call it out and call it what it is. I live it, I eat it, and I sleep it every day in my town. I wanted to bring this up. Let the voters, don't be afraid of it, guys. This is the voters' town. The people will come out and say what they want. And if you put it on the charter change and it gets voted down, then it gets voted down. You break it off. But we can debate all night long about when the fire bell rings or various other departments. When something happens like a disaster, some of the department heads, sorry guys, they didn't show up on time. But that's life. This town was built on promoting from within. Why was it promoting from within? Because all the locals that lived here wanted the next guy up, the captain, the lieutenant, and that to go up the ranks. But then it didn't happen that way. And the less qualified got the appointment over the more qualified because of politics. It's happened. So don't tell me how wonderful this thing is working. It's not. And that's why I hear it from the people. I take their opinion and I say, okay, I'll compromise. Make it department heads and town manager. Let's see how it works. Prove me wrong. And then, if it works, maybe the next step is an all residency. Other towns have it. It works. Our town seems to always think that there's a man with a white horse going to ride into town and save us. I'm going to say it again like I said it for the last 30 years. The only people that are going to save us is us, the ones that live in the town of Southbridge. Thank you.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Councilor Lazo is correct. There's two sides to the story, from the school system to our roads, how they turned into very deplorable ways of getting around, and that all happened years ago. That was not under this leadership, and I'm glad we have this leadership now. I'm glad this is moving forward. But everybody can argue the point of how the school system went to one place to another. Everybody's got an opinion. And then you also have an opinion on how our infrastructure collapsed, how we didn't bring in retail. And that didn't happen our watch. That happened 20 years ago. That happened 10 years ago. Those things are happening. The AO closed. We can go back into history and how that worked out. It's unfortunate for a great town like ours to be in a position where I think we're doing better, but we could do more and all that kind of stuff. But everybody's got two sides to the story, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilor Lazo.
One more comment. I'm glad you brought up the roads. I think we're making a great attempt on them. But remember when the deterioration started, when they started appointing out-of-towners. Hamer Clark was doing sewer renovations, water relining, paving streets, doing all the DPW job. List the dates that he was the DPW director.
Where?
And then we had another DPW director for a year or two that was local. Then they had a revolving door in the DPW.
Councilor Lazo.
And bottom line came down to, here we are, fixing their mistakes.
Thank you, Councilor Lazo. All right, we have an amendment to a motion. It's my understanding that a council of the whole is in effect a subcommittee of the entire council. Therefore, I believe, and I stand to be corrected, but I believe that we can make recommendations to bring to the council at a regular scheduled meeting, and we can act on it at that point. But I think our purpose here tonight is to make a recommendation or recommendations on various amendments. So, with that in mind, the amendment states that the town manager would be subjected to a residency requirement.
I did state adding the department heads.
And adding in the department heads. All right. So it's my understanding then that right now we're looking at an amendment that says the town manager and department heads.
I don't think there was one.
Was there a second? All right.
I'll second it.
Okay,
You're saying
very
the town manager and the department heads?
Yes.
I will second that motion.
Okay. And that the town council may vote to waive this requirement, but must revisit said vote yearly, and that would be by a majority of 5 councilors.
Oh, before we vote on that, should that waiver be For each individual, or should we do it en masse?
It should be on an individual.
I think it should be individuals.
I don't think you have to.
I can't hear.
He was asking if it
Well, I
should
think
be
we should.
individual
So,
case or by en masse.
yeah.
I would say individual if there's a hardship.
That's what I'm thinking.
That would be a determination of the council.
That's what I'm thinking too.
All right, does that need to be,
Probably should be
Placed.
just for clarity.
all right, we can get together after the meeting to get the exact
Yeah,
wording.
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to vote on the amendment then. Everyone clear on what the amendment is? The amendment to the original motion. Okay, voting on the amendment. Roll call, please.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
No.
Counselor Jovan?
No.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes?
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
No.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
And Counselor Adams?
No. It's 4-4.
Is
Yes.
that
It
4-4?
fails.
4-4.
Okay, the motion, the amendment fails, so we go back to the original amendment, which is what Council Lazo submitted, which, let me read it again. Town
No,
re-
wasn't that an amendment to the amendment? Because there was,
Well, to the-
there was the amendment that that Steve's made that I seconded, that was for just the town manager. That was the
Oh,
amendment.
that's
Before
a
there
good
was an
point.
amendment made by Councilor Steves and then seconded by Councilor Lazo to add department heads to
That's a
it.
good point.
So next procedurally would be that motion,
manager.
correct?
Correct.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Which motion are we voting on now?
That would be
Which
just the
amendment?
town manager it would apply to.
Just the town manager?
Yes.
Good point.
Okay. So we're voting now just residency strictly for the town manager?
Yes.
Very good. Roll call, please.
Counselor Daniel?
No.
Counselor Jovan?
What?
No.
I think it was a no. Is that a no, yes?
No.
Okay.
Okay, great.
No.
Okay.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes?
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
No.
And Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
That passes.
Okay, that passes by 5-3. So the original, let me get this straight. The original amendment, the original motion is now amended
Yes.
to apply specifically to the town manager. And everything else stays the same, I assume? That was the written down.
Well, as opposed to that changed too.
This changed too. So it's strictly this, and the town council may extend the 12-month requirement
Yeah.
by a vote of
May
9.
waive this requirement.
May waive or extend?
Waive.
Waive?
Waive. This is the written text.
Okay.
Town council may vote to waive this requirement, but must revisit said vote annually. Because this doesn't apply to the handbook, because I don't, that's.
Right, but this is the original, motion that Council Lazo made.
But we just voted to approve this, and replacing that paragraph and this text with the town manager as the amendment. If I clarify, as I understand it right now, the amendment reads, town residency required, except as provided in Mass General Law, the town manager employed by the town of Southbridge on or after June 14th of 2022 shall, within 12 months of the start of employment, be a resident of the town and shall not cease to be a resident during his or her employment by the town. The town council may vote to waive this requirement, but must revisit said vote annually.
Must waive by majority of 5.
Yes, by majority vote of 5, thank you. Yes.
Okay, everyone all set with that?
No. I can barely hear him.
All right.
Can I just get that read one more time, please?
Okay. Town residency required. Except as provided in Mass General Law, the town manager employed by the town of Southbridge on or after June 14th, 2022, shall, within 12 months of the start of employment, be a resident of the town of Southbridge and shall not cease to be a resident during his or her employment by the town. And the town council may vote to waive this requirement, but must revisit said vote annually by a majority vote of 5 councilors.
Everyone all set? Okay, roll call.
Counselor Jovan?
No.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes?
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
No.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
And Counselor Daniel?
No.
Mr. Chairman,
Council Lazo.
this is just a recommendation to the council.
That's correct.
We can try and amend it at council.
Yeah.
I just want the council to know that. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, one down.
Before we change subject, I just want to let you know that I just sent an email covering some of the subjects that I raised in Boston, Ipswich, the Mass General Law to everybody as well. So, and to Mary for the record.
Very good. Okay. That was well done in terms of debate and conducting a learned and knowledgeable discourse. And it will be brought up again in short order at a regular meeting. Okay. Is there any other business that? Okay, Council Lazo.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chairman. I think the Charter Commission did their job, and I know they worked hard on it, and they put a lot of time in, and I know a lot of people don't come to the meetings, and then other people want to comment it after it's done. They did a great job. They handed it off to the council. It's our job to deal with it at this point. The thing that I'd just like to mention is the one point that I don't think they really spent a lot of time in is on definitions. The one definition that they worked on, if you look under 151, as you read down the definition of bylaw, charter, measure, and then agency. I didn't get it when it said referred to the department of the town as a government organization, blah, blah, blah. Why not call it just the department? Am I off on that one, or is there a reason why it says agency?
Agency was suggested by the town council at the meeting on January 5th.
Okay. Secondly, on definitions, I know that the council, through my experiences, and I saw it this year when it said the town manager will attend all council meetings, all meetings. And the thing is, there was a debate over what will meant, W-I-L-L, and I think, I have no proposals on this, I just want to comment on it, that in a lot of debates that councilors have, shall, may, will, I mean, there's a degree of different things that you have to do it, you may do it, and I think it needed a little more definition there, but I don't want to delay this going forward any longer. I think that they did a fine job, and we'll just deal with it.
Okay. Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I didn't see any of the review committee here, and I appreciate all the hard work, and it just gave me a little bit more time, since this was delayed a little bit, to take a hard look at some of the practices that we've been doing here since I've been here for 3.5 years, and what I feel has been successful and maybe not so much. But I looked at 244, and I looked at the subcommittees, specifically subcommittee, and I guess my definition, I see by its definition, it has the definition, it has the definitions in there as far as what a subcommittee is. And I know it says may establish, right? But I also know in our rules and regulation, there's a requirement to establish subcommittees with 3 and 2, 3 counselors, 2 citizen members. I understand why the subcommittees were set up and how they should work. And that's maybe something that we may have to change in the rules and regulations, and maybe not so much in the charter. Go ahead. Okay. I just wanted to make a point, looking at this and just trying to establish what the subcommittees there, is that when I take a look at our subcommittees now that we have, that's supposed to streamline. There's definitions all through the charter of what the subcommittee should be doing, being transparent, address and resolve some, and be proactive and stuff like that. I agree with that. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. What I see for 3.5 years is we have subcommittee meetings where questions are asked arguments are had or discussions are had. Yet we fix those discussions, and then we bring those same discussions right back to the town council. And it's like rehashing everything. I know by the state law, you're not required to have subcommittees. And I would like the town council to start taking a hard look at what do we have. As subcommittee members, as a chair of a subcommittee, I'm required to provide written minutes in a journal. Yet if I look at the town website, there are subcommittees that have no minutes for over a year. There's big gaps. I actually had to take a look at my P&D for the last 3.5 years, and I noticed that some of my minutes are missing, but I do have them. I mean, if we're going to have a rule in here saying this is what we're going to do, then we should follow that same rule as we expect our department heads to do and our town manager. My question is, now that we're in 2022, is there a real need for subcommittees and doing it, saying the same thing twice over and over when it's videotaped, it's televised, communications out there? I mean, we've got so much communication, it's crazy right now. Does the town council and this town really need subcommittees anymore? That's all. I just wanted to make a point out there. And I can go into more detail if you'd like, though.
Council Steves.
I'll yield to Council Ryan.
Yields to Council Lazo. Council Lazo or Council Ryan?
No, Council Ryan.
Council Ryan.
Thank you, Mr.
One of you
Chair.
guys.
I understand the sentiment put out by Councilor Adams. When I first started following town stuff here, it was clear that subcommittees were things were hashed out, and when you came to subcommittee, there was a couple of odd and end questions. If something changed, there would be an odd and end question. But unless it was highly controversial, there wasn't floor fights on everything, and there wasn't long discussions on everything, because everything was hashed out at the subcommittee level. And you're right, but in the last couple of years, it seems like we're having almost double discussions. There's times I've had the same conversation at Gen Gov, and it's come back up here, and we're having the same discussion. It's like, why are we doing this? I understand, in my perspective, that's what the subcommittee is supposed to be to do. I don't know if I would support personally changing that to reflect, to eliminate subcommittees, and instead I would say we work on addressing what defines the structure and purpose of the council meeting. Is it to rehash everything that's happened at subcommittee? Or is it to be the final body once things have gotten reviewed? You take your vote, you say your piece if you weren't there on the subcommittee. If you were there, you said your piece, we don't got to do it again, right? That's the way it used to be, and it worked.
That's the way it has been.
One thing I also want to say is I know on the website there I've noticed that certain minutes are missing. This town is transitioning right now from one website to another, so things probably could have gotten missing. So maybe it's up to all the subcommittees all the subcommittee chairs to go through and make sure that, at least for their tenure, that the minutes are there, and make sure that that's addressed. But that might explain some of why you're not seeing certain minutes or certain things up there, but I don't know if I would support eliminating the subcommittees, because I think the problem is not with the subcommittee, but I think it's more up here of what is the point of the council meeting as a whole. I mean, in the longest time, it's been to confirm things, to take your vote, and it wasn't to have these long, articulate debates. That was what subcommittee was for. But maybe somebody with a more historical perspective, which I'm sure will say something, will provide insight on that. Thank you.
Council Steves, yours to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, for a couple of things. First off, just to clarify, I think that 244, to go back to what Councilor Adams was saying, that is a little more general than just subcommittees. That gives the council the authority to establish, ad hoc committees to do all kinds of things. We don't do it very often. And the ones that we have our standing subcommittees have been there for forever, for as long as I can remember. But that also allows us to do several other things. And so I think we do need to keep that kind of the way it is. But as far as the subcommittee issue, I agree largely with what you said, Jackie, because we have seen a lot more debate up here, in part because we're not getting the attendance at subcommittees that we were getting. When there are several councilors, quite frankly, that frequently do not show up to subcommittees, even their own. even the ones that they're actually appointed to. And that's a problem. And that says something about, quite frankly, their attention to detail. But on the flip side, we could also, if we really wanted to, we could probably address all of things up here at full council. Most boards of selectmen do that. And we have obviously more of us here than the typical board of selectmen does. And most of the towns that I would cover as a newspaper reporter, they don't have subcommittees for their boards of selectmen. They just do everything at the full meeting. And half of the stuff, obviously, that goes through town meeting as opposed to our system. So we would be doing town meeting stuff and selectmen stuff. So if we were going to do that, we might have to meet more often. But even if we met every Monday for a while to get things done, if we needed to, we would be having fewer meetings than we meet now for subcommittees. Because as it is now, we can often have 4 or 5 subcommittee meetings a week, plus the full council meeting, which is a little crazy. It's crazy making for everybody. We remember that discussion we had, about a month or so ago with the town manager about trying to rearrange how we do meetings in the evenings because it's getting overwhelming. And, for those of us who've been here for a long time, I'm sure I'm well into the 300 range, just every year we have hundreds of meetings between subcommittee and full council and stuff like that. And so we can probably do something to streamline it more effectively. The charter doesn't specifically, if I remember correctly, I don't think the charter specifically says that we have to do subcommittees.
I just want to, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Councilor.
I don't remember.
I just want to point out, it does not.
Go ahead.
It does not, but the rules and regulations does.
Yeah, that's easy to change. The charter is not.
Correct.
We can change the rules and regs as we need them.
That's what I pointed
has
out at
to
the
go
very
to
beginning.
ballot.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's it at the moment. Yeah, thanks.
Good. Councilor Watson.
History lesson.
Yep.
It's politics, guys. Sometimes you can go to subcommittee, and subcommittee is where you gather the information. When we had 13 councilors, we had so many subcommittees, and you didn't have to attend all of them. Your subcommittee, you entrusted them to bring the information back to the council.
Right.
And although they were the information bank at the council meeting, so in other words, if I'm chairman of PPP, and I know that most of my stuff comes up to council, there's very little debate, little here, little there. Most of the time when you get a floor fight or debate is when you didn't like the answer at subcommittee. So you try and lobby the full council. That's politics. I think subcommittees are essential, but I also think that some of our department heads, not to pick on them, they're like, hurry up, I have this grant just landed on my... Stop. I never saw that before back on my first tour. It was like you would lay out, the department head would gather information on what he needed to go to subcommittee. Then you'd have one subcommittee a month. If you had a second one, you'd be lucky. But if you constantly not prepared down at the lower level and you just keep pushing everything to the manager and the manager's pushing everything to the subcommittee, that has to stop. I already told the front office at my committee, we have a particular person that just, on a moment's notice, I need this right away. That's not the way government works. Usually when the manager and his department heads lay out the plan of attack on a issue, it slowly evolves from subcommittee, council, presentation. But we're constantly being hit like, the house is on fire, I need it right now. Well, you can stop that, like I did. We're not having a meeting. Send it straight to council, because we should not be reactionary to the department head's needs, especially when it's already been sitting on their desk for quite a while, or they've known about it, but then right away they've been working on it for 2 years, but right now we have to ram it through. That is what happens. It happened my first tour and this tour. I sit back and I watch it. My job is try and create a smooth transition. I work with the chairman. Any chairman, subcommittee of a chairman works for the chairman, whether you like to hear that or not. That's how it worked back then, that you're appointed by him. So you deal with him and he lays out everything with the manager, what comes to the subcommittees. He's a very good communicator with me. I can compliment the chairman when he wants something to go to subcommittee. Can we do this? Can we do that? But when we were discussing having subcommittees all on Tuesday, one at 6 and one at 7, pick your subcommittee when you want to have it. I mean, you shouldn't have to meet every single week. You know, it's a little bit much. And you shouldn't have to load a town council agenda where you're here till 11:30. This thing should, under the new manager, should start to slow down a little bit and start, because he batted cleanup. So we had a lot of things to clean up, and I understood we had to take a lot of things in. Well, as we move forward into the next year, it should taper off by nature, despite who's in charge. So I think now that when we talk about should we have subcommittees, absolutely, guys. The small talk and the tearing at an issue and the information fed in, you're better off doing it off camera. And when you come up here, have a healthy debate. I think Councilor Ryan said it best. We need to regulate ourselves up here. And subcommittee would do its job to gather the information, bring it to the council. Chairman recognizes the chairman of subcommittee. This was our recommendation. And then if somebody, or resident, if somebody has a question, usually the chairman of the subcommittee, or I've never seen the department heads up here so much as being on the council right now. We never had a department head. It was always the manager dealing with the council. Because remember what the charter says, we don't deal with department heads, we deal with the manager. Thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also just wanted to add one thing that would also be lost if we got rid of subcommittees would be direct citizen input. That's how I started. That's how I got involved in this local government. When I first moved to town, I got on EHS. I wouldn't be here if I didn't start on those subcommittees and learned my way. You're going to be just getting rid of an opportunity for people to get more involved and learn the system and give back in a real direct way and do so on policies that are being set by this and budgets being set by this council. You'd be eliminating direct citizen input in a way that's been tradition for Southbridge for so many years. I personally couldn't do it. I think it would hurt the process, not help it. I think the reasoning behind it is sound and good, but the idea is flawed, and it will only hurt the town in the long term. It will produce less discussion and less input from the town as a whole, because everything will be up here, and I'm going to be blunt, everything gets a lot more politicized up here compared to if it's in a subcommittee where you worked out. And I don't think that's as helpful for discussions and trying to come up with good government solutions to just be shoving it all up here and then doing it all up here in front of the cameras and everybody. And the point of subcommittees is to be working committees, to go through all this stuff and get citizen input. And I just think all that would be lost if that were lost. Thank you.
Councilor Lazo.
I just want to use one example. When we had that terrible rainstorm and we had washouts on Page Hill, washouts on all over Southbridge, I went to a DPW meeting, and I commend our DPW chairman the way he handled it. There were so many residents at the subcommittee meeting, and the citizen input was overwhelming. And I turned around and said, this is the way subcommittee is supposed to work. Then when that happened, it went to council. And then the manager and the council were knocking the 10 on the issue. But it was nice to see the citizens. It was one of the meetings that you could see this is the way subcommittee is supposed to work. Right. And I think Jackie brings that point out that I'm not sure how many citizens want to come up here on TV. But they'll go to a subcommittee and talk with you. Seems to be easier for them. Thank you.
That's true.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All valid points. I'm not disagreeing with you. My question is, do we need subcommittees? And that's it. I mean, you have citizens forum, you have the ability to come up here and speak and all that kind of stuff. I already know, we all know that. And the concept behind subcommittees is great if it was utilized right. And that's where I think we're failing as a town council, is that you have the ability to gather the information. The chairman or councilors, it doesn't matter who it is, but you speak to the department heads before it comes up, and you can squash some things, you can change some things, and I just recently did that just because I didn't think it was prepared or the company was prepared to provide a good product to the town council. But I think we as a council then need to take a look at our rules and regulations, even though the chart, and maybe tighten it up just a little bit on requirements, you know, because when we come up here, it's a healthy discussion. I have no problem with, I've never had a problem with counselors or residents come up here and speak on behalf of a subject, but it goes back and forth, politicized, I got it. But we spend 4 hours here discussing what we just discussed at the subcommittee level, And you're right, there are some that don't want to come up here in front of the thing. And we also know, we have counselors that love the television in front of our faces, so, and speak there. So I just say, maybe we need to take a look at this. I don't think I was just wanting to make sure the subcommittee we were talking about was the subcommittees for here. Ad hocs, that's part of the requirements that a chair can set up anytime, and it's specifically spelled out here in the charter. I have no problem with that. I would like to take a look at it down the road, rules and regulations, and maybe just have a healthy discussion on that. Thank you.
Councilor
Not
Ryan.
to belabor it.
Thank you. I just also want to point out that we did, because you weren't here, and you brought up town council rules and regs, this general government subcommittee did meet while you were on vacation and discussed starting the process of reviewing the entirety of that. And we recommended at the subcommittee level to have it be put up to a full council of the whole, because we felt it was more appropriate, but every council have input instead of a subcommittee. And I think that'd be something that could be directed during that time. We could have that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to provide that information because I know you were away at the time.
I was. Thank you very much.
So that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? No? Councilors on remote? Very good. Council Steves.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a question about where we're going from here as far as do we actually want to break these up and kind of lay out, as I mentioned at the last council meeting, whether we want to break it up to lay it out for the way we want to do it at the ballot. How are we going to set it up? Do we want to talk about that now, or do we wait, or does that happen later?
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how we're doing it. But do we do it right now? And we make sense we're here.
I think that that happens a little bit later in the process. First off, we need to know what it is that we want to go forward with. Right. So we need to take what we did tonight and bring that to the council, the full council at a regular meeting. And then once whatever happens finalizes this document, then we can check with council and find out exactly what our options are, and then I can come back to council and say, all right, this is what our options are, what's your pleasure? And we can go from there. Personally, I do want to see ballot questions, questions, and we also do need to go to the state legislature as well. So there's an involved process that's going on with this, and I want to be careful. I want to do this right. I want to give it due diligence. I think the Charter Review Committee did a bang-up job. I think they did a wonderful, wonderful job, and I want to respect the work that they've done by giving it due diligence and making sure also paramountly that the people in town, the citizens, the taxpayers, get a good product and are given the chance to have their say in what it is that they wish to happen. I think that's paramount above all, that the taxpayers, that the citizens have a say in their government. And this is one way to do it. I want to make sure we do it the right way. I don't want any problems to come out of this. So I'm with all respect to the council members, I hope that you'll bear with me as I take not a lot of time, but I do my due diligence and take some time to make sure that we're doing it right. Councilor Marchetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it would be a good idea if we had a public hearing on this charter, changes for the charter. It just would, I think it would be a better way to do this going forward, let the residents, if they want to get involved, so we can explain to them what exactly all these changes are for. I mean, I went through all the changes, and there's a lot of them, I think, that are just word changes. I'm not sure we would need to put everything on the ballot, but
Yes, we do.
Well, I'll yield to Councilor Steves, but I mean, if we put every one of them on the ballot, it would be more than 60 ballot questions, and I don't think we want to do that. So, I mean, I think we could get away with, I think what we should consider is just picking out the most important ones, like changing how bylaws are read, increasing the size of boards and commissions, replacing town council may transfer unencumbered appropriations with town manager may transfer unencumbered. These are some of the most the most important ones. The rest of them, I look at them, and a lot of them are just changing a few words here and there, changing definitions. But more importantly, I think we should have a public hearing before we do send this off for a vote.
Before we send this off to...
Before we send this to the legislature, or even the town council makes a final vote on it, shouldn't we have I would suggest we have a public hearing on it. That would be my suggestion.
Councilor Ryan, then Councilor Adams.
Thank you. I would be fine personally with a public hearing as well. I think having the public input before the vote, we would take place as a council to put things on the ballot. I think it's my understanding, and again, I may be wrong, different towns may do it differently, but it was my understanding that a whole charter change has to be voted as one document. You cannot split it up. That's been my experience. Yeah, I have never seen a community split up the whole charter into different questions, because you would get what Councilor Marchetti points to is sometimes 60 different changes. So I would feel comfortable, like the chairman said, getting a legal opinion about whether or not we can even do that. Because it's been my experience, and it's diverse and limited in my experience, but has been that you have to do the charter in its entirety. You cannot just do section by section by section. And that's it.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Try to answer Councilor Ryan's question or statement. We are working on that as far as that's concerned. We're with council, as the chair said, so we know there's an SEL after that. But we are working on that. I'm not sure really about a public hearing, but more so another council, the whole meeting or something like that. Every meeting is public. So maybe a summary of what has been changed, or what we plan on voting on, or whatever it may be. I don't know how fast this has to go up, maybe from the June to November ballot or whatever it may be. Obviously, everybody wants to do it correctly and legally and make sure it sticks before it goes to the ballot. But, I'm not opposed to having some type of summary that's brought out there on the sections that have been changed and just read out. And public is always welcome to come to the chambers and call the counselors as well to move forward. So I don't know. My thoughts at that point in time, but I guess we'll address that later on, or sooner than later, probably.
Councilor Lazo.
I think there's a lot of good on both sides of the discussion here. I'm not in favor of rushing it. Let's do it right. Do what we have to do. Find out what we have to find out before we place it. Because once you place it, it goes in motion. As far as the public hearing, I don't have a problem with it either. What it does is, public hearing has to send out notifications, in a certain manner. You have the public hearing the same night as the adoption of the changes, and that's an invitation for people to come up. We are a representative form of government. Technically, the manager, special legislation in the 70s always said the manager took the place of the selectmen, the council took the place of the people. So with that in mind, there's a lot of different things that comes to your mind. But nowadays, the word transparency seems to be the popular word of the day, where if you have a public hearing, it's not going to hurt you. But the thing is, you can always say, we had a public hearing, where were you? Because, you always take that chastising in the public eye. And I think it's a good idea, just the intent of the open and transparency.
Councilor Steves, then Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While you were commenting on that, I actually jumped over to state law, which is, and this is, and I hate to say this, but this is going to throw a wrench in the works here. It specifically states, and I don't know if I'm reading this right, so we definitely need to get an attorney to look at it. Chapter 43B, Section 10, amendments to charters previously adopted or revised under this chapter. One of the lines in here specifically states, where'd it go? Only a charter commission elected under this chapter may propose any change in a charter relating in any way to the composition, mode of election, or appointment or terms of office of the legislative body, the mayor or city manager, or the board of selectmen or town manager. That creates a bit of a wrinkle in changing, if we're talking about changing, part of what we just voted on, that may have to go to our elected charter commission.
All right.
Yes.
All the more reason for me to speak with Council.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilor Adams, then Councilor Lazo.
I'm under the understanding over the years, when you change the powers of government or an alignment in numbers or the duties, that's where you need the elected charter commission. We might be walking on the line,
I think we need to
and
clarify.
maybe we have to look into it.
We need to
Yeah.
clarify.
Then I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Councilor Adams.
So I'd ask Councilor Steves if he could send that to all of us,
going to.
because that was a long verbiage, and my brain is not that big, so appreciate it. But I will say with what Councilor Marquetti said before about a public hearing, and then Councilor Lazo for explanation, I would agree with that as well. I don't have a problem changing my mind on that at all. I think it's a good idea, if we're allowed to. Thank you.
Councilor Jovan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To echo what Steve said, I'll have to talk slow because I can hear the echo. I would read the statement from the law. I would caution for this judiciously. Obviously, that's happening.
I have no idea what you said.
Neither do I.
Agree.
I have no idea what you said.
I think we lost him.
I can't understand English.
No, I stopped because you can't.
I just don't know.
You don't
I
know?
have no idea what he's saying.
All right.
That's why it doesn't work.
Okay. All right. Well, is there any further discussion? Any further issues, any more issues that council wants to bring up?
We can't talk about anything else other than the agenda item, right?
No, this is it. We're on this right now.
No.
This is it.
A quick question. Should we actually move to make a motion to vote on actually authorizing you to seek an attorney? Should we do that now, or should we do it after
I think we
the full
should wait
council?
until we actually have a document to vote on. Council hasn't approved anything yet.
That makes sense. Okay, you're right. Yeah.
Well, I think
At least
I'm in somewhere. I believe it that the chair of the council can seek legal action, not legal action, legal opinion, if need be, for the information. And some of the stuff I think we need to have beforehand.
I'm thinking that section definitely would affect might affect certain people who we're just talking
Mr.
about.
Chairman,
Certainly.
this is the reason why this can't be rushed.
Right.
I
agree.
know there are some people that want this to go to the ballot this year. If it doesn't, that's fine. We can do it next year. The town's not going to fall apart. It's just, let's do it right before we send it forward.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. I'll start my due diligence and make sure that we get it going. Anything else? Very good. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Jovan?
Yeah.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes?
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you.